Dr. Crystal Brimer, welcome.
Thank you, Steve. I'm happy to be here.
Well, it's great to have you. A lot of RODs want to make dry eye a more meaningful part of their practice. You didn't just add dry eye as a specialty. You built an entire institute around it. And I'm curious, what was the moment that you realized that dry eye could be a true specialty, not just a side service for your practice, but the service that you offered?
Mhm. Well, back in 2015, I opened a new practice. I'd been in practice, I kind of sold it, and we were starting again. And at that point, I remember having the free dry eye screening sign out front. And so it was a part, like what you're saying. And that was 15. By the time 18 rolled around, and keep in mind, at that point, we had very little. We had Lipoflow and Blefx. I mean, there was, and Restasis. That seemed like about it. But it's still, I realized the need was so great. And I remembered, I have a little book of epiphanies and I only write really important stuff in there. And I remember saying, what's the worst that could happen? And I added up every 92015 and 92250 and all my routine codes. And I said, if all this routine revenue disappeared in one day, could I survive? And what I didn't think about was what's the best case scenario. And it has absolutely just transformed my life professionally, and brought so much fulfillment. But that was the instigation to begin with, was the fact that I didn't feel like I was able to do dry eye at the level that these people needed it. And I wanted to be able to dive in deeper and bring them more resolution and do whatever it took to figure out what treatments will bring that, and how do I get from A to Z. And it's hard incorporating it into a regular practice.
I would encourage anyone listening to go back and find the TED Talk by Tim Ferriss, who wrote the 4 Hour Work Week, because his TED Talk discusses just that, how his decision-making process runs things through a filter of what's the worst that could happen.
Mm-hmm.
And then contrast that with what's the best that could happen. And a lot of his decisions, he decided, it's not that bad. But I'm curious, why
Right.
do so many people remain dabblers? You're the anti-dabbler, and I use that term for people who just they dip their toes in the water with specialty, but they're afraid to go all in. Is it an over focus on the negative side of things?
I think they get caught up in the whirlwind of the day. And a lot of times, they'll go to a meeting or they'll buy a device, and they don't necessarily, they get excited, but they don't put enough investment into the steps to make it a strategy, the steps to make it incorporated into their practice. And I mean, that's what we focus on entirely at Dry Eye Institute. And one of the reasons why I feel like I can do that and we can do it successfully is because, I've been there, I'm trying to infuse it, watching others, listening to their stories, and then incorporating different protocols and strategy to make it actually happen. Because the reality is they come back, they want to do better, they want better outcomes, but the waiting room is full. They've got staff mindset that has to shift. They don't want to feel like they're selling, but yet they're trying to convert patients. And so it's like this bicycle spoke of all these different things that are just taking them down a notch, and then it fizzles out.
Is that the answer? Systems, protocols, because something I hear all the time is we just don't have time. I would love to do more dry eye. I would love to grow my myopia management specialty. I just don't have time. Is getting past that thinking, will that take you closer to systems and protocols? And can you give us a sneak peek at what that looks like through the Dry Eye Institute? Obviously, you can't go granularly into all the different protocols, but can you give us an example of what that might look like?
Well, here's what I would say first is sometimes strategy works against us because people will start with strategy and not be in the state of mind to actually make it work. And I think first and foremost, they've got to have that dedication and that state of mind that this is what we're doing. And once they have that conviction, Then the strategy part is much easier. But too many times we don't draw that line in the sand at the practice where you gather everybody around and say, this is how it's going to work from now on. This is how things are going to be different, and stick to it. And so I'll give you an example, just a tidbit of protocol that changes everything. One year I was on stage at a meeting, and I had, I don't know, 6 doctors up there who had been to Dry Eye Institute. And one of them said, we're 90 days out. We've done 100 dry eye evals. We're on pace to bring in an extra $285,000 this year, just from basically we did one thing differently. And so we're all ears. We're like, what is it? We screen everyone. And that's what I preach from the very first hour of Dry Eye Institute. This is rule number 1, and you don't ever go back. You screen every single person, every single exam, every year. There are no exceptions. And the reason is, when you start having exceptions, then all of a sudden you're not doing it. And I'll give you another story. I was doing a DEI office, basically online with an office, and the doctor's there, and he's asking the head tech. He's like, well, we used to screen everybody. What happened? And the head tech says this verbatim: well, we weren't doing kids, and then we just weren't doing anybody. And that's kind of what happens. And so you make these hard, fast rules that are not, there are no exceptions. And it's not start at this age, or it's only, don't do glaucoma follow-ups, or don't do this, because then all of a sudden there's too much thought that has to go into, are we screening them or are we not? And there's too many folks who fall through the cracks. But that's a pivotal point in changing it from being reactive care to proactive care, is screening every single person. And it needs to be an objective screening, ideally, and not subjective. And surveys are fine. I mean, it's certainly better than nothing. But my issue with that is, now that patient believes that whatever you're about to recommend is based on their symptoms. And so they either consider, it's not worth it, I can live with this, or they do the work until they feel better, and then they stop because they believe it was based on their symptoms. I don't want that. I want my treatment and my entire discussion around this to be based on objective findings and not subjective. But it's got to be something they can see. They've got to have that picture and that story that gives them a why.
You're talking about strategy, which seems to work really well, screening people before, screening every patient before. Doctors come up with a lot of strategies, and sometimes things go sideways when they can't get the staff's buy-in. What is your approach? I'm sure you teach this as well through the Dry Eye Institute, and maybe sharing some of your personal examples. How do you get the staff on board, and how do you maintain consistency and accountability as well? Because you gave a situation where it comes up a lot. You, it's not getting done, and the doctor goes to the staff and says, "Are we doing it?" No, I don't think we're doing it. We did it for a week or two, and then we went back to the old way of doing things. So how do you maintain that level of consistency and accountability with the team?
All right, 2 things. One, if I want to use a machine, so for example, let's say we're using the Oculus 5M, and we've got 3 different screening tests to give us a snapshot of water, oil, inflammation. I want that done on every patient. I can't put it out of the way. It's got to be in the flow. And so it has to be convenient for the staff. I can't be asking them to print a report and they've got to go up front and get it. I don't want to worry about Wi-Fi issues. I want that device exactly in the workup flow, and I want a printer hardwired to it where they are not slowed down. That's the biggest thing, because when you start slowing down the flow, there's going to be a trickle effect that ends up quitting, whether it's inspired by them or inspired by the doctor at the end, because you're too slow. So making it convenient, not messing with their flow. But then the other thing that is most helpful is you choose one person. This one person is your dry eye ambassador, and this is your liaison between myself and the other staff. So if somebody else is taking pictures and they're no good, I don't talk to them. I talk to the liaison. I'm like, fix this, make this better. It's my liaison between myself and the patients. So when they call with the triage questions and issues that they shouldn't be coming to me, they need a very knowledgeable resource. It needs to be that one person, because I don't want the patient's getting mixed messages from different people. And then I also need her to be a liaison between me and every other office as far as driving referrals and being that communication, that face of the company. So she's my face for other offices, for patients, and for my staff. And that protects relationships. It makes it more effective. But the biggest thing it does is it allows me to invest fully into her and make sure that she is the best she can be. And then she trains everybody else. So I'm not having to be pulled in 10 directions, worrying about every staff member knowing how to screen properly. I invest in her. So once you pick this person, and you're picking it based on talent, not skill. You can train the skill, but you can't train the talent, right? So I'm picking the right personality that can lead the others, that is empathetic and compassionate to the patient, that's articulate, that is organized and can keep track of these PAs and how to get them successfully accepted, but is also a good personality for outside the office. So it's a very specific person within the office. And the challenge is, couple things. One, it can't be a flight risk. So it's got to be somebody that's loyal to the practice and is not going anywhere. But also, it can't be the same person that you give everything to, because everybody's got this star in the office. And then that's great. You can make her your ambassador, but she's not available. So it has to be somebody who's actually available to play out all these roles. And then as far as getting her there, first of all, we make it an honor. You make the business cards and you post it on social media and you do all these things saying this person is different. When I'm talking to my patients, I say, listen, you have any questions, you call back, you ask for her, she knows everything. And if she doesn't, she'll come get me. And so I'm building her up in front of that patient and in front of the other staff members. But how she gets there, what I've found to be most successful is I do it. I do the first 5, maybe even 10 dry eye evals, and I'm doing the acquisition on the machine, and all she's doing is watching and absorbing. I'm doing the patient education, the story with the patient. She's just absorbing. And that's the best way to make her great, as opposed to spending 20 minutes here and 30 minutes here and then telling her to run with it.
How was her training different? Because sounds like a very critical person in your organization. And maybe you just partly answered that question, but you said her training involves observing. How much time for an office that is at a point where they're building up this specialty and they want to have that point person? Is it important that they understand the clinical side of things at a
Mm-hmm.
high level in addition to the operational? What do you want them to know? And can you give an overview of what that training might look like?
Definitely. So one of the resources we have in Dry Eye Institute is it's called What to Say. And it's every treatment there is, and there's even conditions in there. And this is the verbiage I want you to have. So that's part of their training. Is everybody that walks in the office has a copy. It's at every station, but my dry eye ambassador needs to know it by heart, because I can sell a bottle of $100 vitamins easily in the chair. I can tell the story of why it's different. But when they run out and they come back and they say, why am I spending $100 on vitamins? I need that story to be the same. I need that verbiage to be the same. So first of all, scripting and equipping them with what they need to learn and having it just well laid out. The other thing is helping them know what we're looking for on the test. So Steve, that's a great question, because for example, when she's doing upper lid images on this 5M, I don't want them lifting the lid. That's not helpful to me. I want them torquing that lid so that I can see the base of the lashes to see if there's any follicles. I can see the meibomian gland openings. I can see the superior conge as they're looking down. So I'm getting all this information. But if all she knows is it's an upper lid picture, we're never going to get it. So that's what I mean by watching me do it. I'm doing her job. I'm doing the acquisition, but I'm explaining this is not just lifting. I'm torquing, I'm pushing my thumb in, I'm using that orbital bone as some leverage to get A, B, and C. And then we're looking for oil coming out on interferometry. And I'm explaining to her, all right, you see this rainbow. We don't want the rings in focus. We want to come out a little bit. But what that does is it allows her, when she's doing that collection with the patient, to get excited with them and say, oh my gosh, look at this. There's a rainbow on there. There's oil coming out. And so it makes it where she's part of this. It's not just the doctor and she's checking off a list. She gets to celebrate with them and to help them understand why to do things. And I designed that software. And so when I designed it, on the acquisition screen, it has an example picture and it has the instructions. And I thought this will be good for staff, for autonomy, to empower them. But I never really talked to other doctors, staff members. And one time I was at a meeting and one of my Dry Eye Institute docs from several months earlier, he said, oh my gosh, you've got to meet Brandy. I'm like, okay. And I go and I meet his tech and she's just squealing. She's so excited. and I'm like, is she drinking? It was late. Everything. I was like, all right, she's having a good time. I said, Brandy, can I talk to you tomorrow? So we meet at the same spot in the lobby bar the next morning. And no, it was not alcohol. She was so genuinely excited. And I said, what is it, Brandy? This is just who you are. And she said, no, it's not. It's because I can turn that machine around and I'm part of this. It's not just him. And, she said, my excitement was down here. Now it's way up here because of that. And she can get excited with that patient. And, she went on to get all 3 levels of COA, COT, what are all the levels? The other one. And she ended up being para-optometric of the year for AOA. And as part of it started right here of just becoming part of the solution instead of just checking some boxes and it being just technical.
Yeah, that's a great story. And I think it really reflects how important it is that the training, if we do it right, it leads to trust, it leads to confidence, and it leads to a level of excitement that is going to probably improve a lot of the outcomes and the patient buy-in that you get. If I feel that in not just you, but in the staff, that really means a lot to me as a consumer. And I think we're hitting on some key things here that prevent patients taking action. We talked about the doctor, which is a legitimate, if without good systems in place, when doctors say, I don't have time. Yes, if you're in a high volume, very busy practice without good systems in place, you may indeed not have time. We talked about how to build systems around that. We talked about staff resistance. Change management is a real thing. There can be challenges with getting staff to change and adopt new procedures and protocols and having that key person, you call it a liaison in your practice that oversees that. I'm sure it's not perfect every day, but you've got that point person that you can continue to work on things operationally. But I want to talk about another one we haven't really hit on, patient resistance. You've got patients coming in who they still have the mindset of that COVID. Your practice may be a little bit different because they might know what they're getting when they come in because you're all dry eye, but I'm sure you still have some challenges with that. Or patients that have had a bad experience somewhere else where it didn't work, or they had um, they just had they didn't get the results they want. They didn't get the outcome. They're skeptical. They're hesitant to move forward. How do you have those structure conversations with those patients?
This is actually one of my favorite parts. And this is what we spend a ton of time on at Dry Institute because it's so pivotal. No, optometrists, maybe more so than other doctors, I don't know, but we don't like to sell things. It's just not been in our nature. We talk about don't spend the money for the patient. No, we do the opposite. We save the money for the patient, and when it's not always the best care. And so I know that's the audience that I'm dealing with and that it's uncomfortable. And so I've really spent a lot of time helping them understand how to achieve this and just feel like the messenger and not a salesperson, because that's what I feel like all day, every day. In the end, if they don't want to do it, that's fine. I have no problem with it. But the reality is, when I explain it the way that I do, our conversion rate is 94%. I mean, it is rare that somebody's in my chair for an eval that's not getting a procedure. My entire day is just, I have 2 dry eye evals and then we have procedures. So how do we get that? Here's how. Patients want to know why. And I give them the because. I give them a story that they can see and they can understand for themselves, and then a solution. So I want to rewind a little bit because this is a really layered discussion. Um, and there's some key parts. The first key part is the patient setup. So I found that some patients are paying attention to me, some patients were not. And why were they not? It's because they were distracted by exactly what you said, past experiences. They were distracted by their baggage. And so I thought through this and I said, okay, how do I diffuse each one of these pieces of baggage? Because ultimately it happened organically. And I was looking back retrospectively going, how did that happen? And here's what I discovered. They want, they want to be part of the plan. They don't want to be sold something. They don't want to have to worry about writing things down. And they want to know that I have a plan. And so I'm happy to share what my setup is. It's about 90 seconds and it works beautifully, but it's diffusing those pieces of baggage so that they listen to me. Because once I do it and I come in an authoritative way, then they don't feel like they have to help me. They don't feel like they have to be defensive and protect themselves. And that's really important. All of a sudden, they feel like we're on the same team. And I live that out. I'm not taking advantage of them. I'm not using it to manipulate them. I'm using it to get the outcome so that they'll be engaged with me when I do the patient education part. I do a little exam in the middle, and then the main part of my time is spent on the explanation. And I give them a good, better, best for everything that is wrong. And I show them. I show them pictures that they believe for themselves because it's obvious. And then I show them the things that aren't intuitive, like my biography. Because my biography, for example, some doctors are just doing that. Well, the patient sees it, but they don't know if it's really clinically relevant. Are you just using that to get me to do something? And so that's a big part of it, is showing them the things they can see for themselves, and then helping them understand the why behind that picture. Why does it look inflamed? Why do we not have oil? Why are you're having to blink to see better? It's because of this issue. And now that issue is relevant to them. And here's the solutions that we can bring. So do you want to hear my setup?
Well, we have to hear it now. You
We
can't
have to.
tease the 90-second
I
magic and then not deliver it. So,
know.
yes, we're all ears.
Okay. So come in and I say, we're referral centers. So about 95% of people get to us from that. The only reason I tell you that is to say that they're miserable like you. They've got a long list of problems for a lot of years. They've tried a bunch of stuff and here they are. That's 100% of our patient base. And despite that being our patient base, we get phenomenal results. As long as you're willing to do the work, we will get there. I have no doubt in my mind. And the reason I know that is because of the investigative part that we do today. We're going to find out what we're dealing with, what's the underlying issue, and the rest is just follow through. I've got this long list of differentials, and I'm going to find out, are you making enough water, enough oil? Is there allergy, inflammation, bacteria, lid function, something systemic, something environmental? We're going to do tests in every category. And then whatever's positive, we're going to pair it with a treatment that's really good at that category. Now, here's the fine print. It's probably not going to be one thing at this point. And so one thing breaks something else, it breaks something else. So whatever's wrong, we have to treat it simultaneously, or you're going to feel like that didn't work either. So think about it like a boat with 3 holes. We got to plug every single one of them. So it might be cumbersome in the first part, but it's just to get you stable. When you come back, whatever area is better, we can start backing off. If it's not all the way better, we'll add to it. So my goal today, just figure out what's going on. And then I'm going to show you every single picture. I'm going to summarize it because it's a lot. And then I'm going to give you a good, better, best for anything that's wrong. And you and I are going to decide together based on what your goal is. Is it fast or easy or natural or cheaper? Whatever you want, that's what we're going to do. I'm going to make a plan based on that. And it's all going to be written down. So you don't need to worry about remembering. Does that sound okay? And then they say yes. Now, again, I'm not saying this in an effort to manipulate them. I want to get rid of the things that will distract them. So what I just told you is I've got a plan. This is not going to be trial and error. We're going to get our result. I'm going to give you, options, and you're going to be part of this plan, and I'm going to write it all down. And so it just diffuses some of the situations in their past where maybe they didn't get that type of communication. And so at that point, my dry eye person has acquired everything. The only thing I do the lid flip for my biography because I want to know if it's floppy or not to correlate it with sleep apnea. I do my slit lamp exam and I do debridement expression. So my exam is really small. It's more about going through the data. So then I put the collage image up there and I say, all right, I'm going to show you what your status is on all those categories we talked about, because that's part of me following through on what I promised that patient. And we go through, all right, here's the water. Look at this lid, see how it's inflamed. These oil glands are not moving. There's no color on here. I want it to be like a rainbow. And because of that, the tears are breaking up. Here's your actual glands. So I go through that. And then I sit back and say, all right, so we've got two main issues. We've got inflammation and oil. We got a little bit of bacteria, a little bit of allergy. And then I go through each one and I say, all right, for oil, good, better, best. Here's our options. Once I walk through all that, then I say, we've got two decisions to make. One is, what are we going to do today? And then the other decision is, what are we going to come back and make our big picture plan be? And so for today, I would do this, and this, and then I'd come back and do that. And I use my hands a lot so I could kind of keep these categories separate in their mind so it's easier to understand. But it makes sense to them and they're willing to do it. And the reality is I know it works. So it's not going to be something that they're going to regret.
Can I tell you what I like about all that? You saw
Yes.
me jotting down notes as I was going through it. So I think it's so important, not just what you say, but how you say it from a communication standpoint. I really believe, and I've seen it firsthand, a lot of times the outcomes that doctors get can really be contingent on how they deliver that message. So I want to share some things that I really appreciate about the way you delivered that. One, the fact that it's 90 seconds.
Mhm.
I think we start losing them after 2 minutes in that initial pitch, that initial invitation. And I remind people it's not about getting a yes or no. It's about getting them to move sometimes just from hesitation to a willingness to at least entertain what we're talking about, curiosity, a
Yeah.
sense of wanting to learn more. If we could just get them to that point, at least we've got them, we've got their attention at least. But I like the fact that it's short and it's to the point. You said at the beginning of it, one of the things you say to the patients, we get phenomenal results. And it is so important to demonstrate proof. We could give all the claims in the world, but we have to be able to demonstrate proof. And that sentence alone demonstrates that I've done this a lot and I've gotten the proof. I've talked to doctors before, no names, of course, no HIPAA violations, but talking about patient stories that you've had with other patients and the results that you've been getting is so much more impactful. It's it's simple, and you gave a good analogy with the boat and keeping it very simple and understandable. One of the best ways to lose the patient is to make things complicated because our brains, from a psychological standpoint, the minute we don't understand something, we're out because it feels too risky. And then involving. And I want to ask a follow up to that because you said before about making the patient a participant and you say at the end, you and I will decide. Some doctors have trouble with that because they think, no, I'm the doctor. I'm going to write a prescription and I
Mhm.
expect you to follow through on it. The data shows patients don't want that. They want to be part of the treatment plan. They want to be involved in decisions that impact their own health. So you seem to agree with the latter, where we might have a direction we want patients to go, but we give the patient some agency and autonomy. We give them the information. At the end of the day, though, we want them, our job is to help them make the best decision. But at the same time, how aggressive do we need to be in saying in terms of how adamant are we that they follow a certain protocol versus giving them the option? Does that make sense?
It does. Um, I think they definitely want to be part of it. And especially when we're talking about out of pocket, that changes things entirely. So primarily to get these amazing outcomes, well, I don't want to say primarily, but the devices are an essential tool in some cases, right? You're mild to moderate, you can get uh, outcomes all day long without it. But for those severe cases, a lot of times we need that. And so, especially when we're talking about something that's going to be out of pocket, it's important that they don't feel like they're being sold. And that's what turns them off from some doctor before you. And so you want to tread lightly in that, in making it available to them and showing them the proof of what it can do, but making it their decision. Because what you don't want to do is have any bitterness later or them feel like expectations and reality were not matched. So I find in this world of dry eye and the limited insurance coverage, this is a must. Um, yeah.
And if they trust you and if they're confident in you, there's a phrase that goes, let the other side have your way. And I usually use that in reference to staff, but the more we involve people and give people some autonomy, as long as we are very clear and confident in setting the sort of the vision of what we're trying to accomplish, but you involve other people in the decision. A lot of times they'll make the decision you want them to make, but they have a greater sense of buy-in when they feel like they had a role in making that decision.
See, that's the thing, Steve. When I do it that way, they hardly ever want to go another route other than what I've
Mhm.
recommended. I mean, it's literally like 5% of the time. But I'm very clear in saying, here's what I would do. If any part of this is not okay, if there's a barrier, you let me know and we'll talk about alternatives. But I'm also clear in the expectations for the alternative. So I'll give you an example. Let's say I've got a severe patient there and I want to do, I'm going to get them on their omega-3 and their nulids, and I'm going to sleep with the sleep mask and this and this. And then I want you to come back and we're going to do IPL. We're going to do it 4 times, or maybe we're going to do Tixel, whatever it is, doesn't matter. If you have an issue with that and we can't, or you don't want to do that, the alternative is I'll write you drugs and we're going to delay coming back because it's going to take at least a couple months to take effect. When you come back, chances are we're going to have to add something else. And so then we're going to wait another 6 weeks, and then we may or may not need to add something else. The long and short of it is the trajectory is different. It's if we do at home things and we do pharmaceuticals, we can get there. We really can. It's just going to be slower and it's going to be way more dependent on your performance, which means if you go on vacation and you're not keeping up your end of the bargain, you're going to feel it. Whereas when I do more things in the office and I take that burden and that load, it helps stabilize and it helps raise the bar of what your bottom feels like. And so it's not dependent on your performance, and there's not as much homework, but even when you miss it, it's okay. So it's two different paths. We certainly get there much quicker with in-office treatments, but it doesn't mean they can't get there the other way.
Crystal, as we close out here, I heard the phrase before, don't compare your chapter 2 to somebody else's chapter 27. For
Mhm.
doctors that are listening that are at their own chapter 2, but would like to get somewhere closer to where you're at, if not a practice exclusively devoted to dry eye, at least a practice that makes dry eye or whatever specialty they're interested in a more meaningful part of the practice. But let's focus on dry eye. Somebody who seriously wants to elevate that part of their practice, what are the first handful of moves, the first 2 to 3 moves that you would suggest, let's say they make in the next 90 days to set themselves up for success? What should, I think it's great to have the big picture of what you want to create, but what are the quick wins that they could get now that's going to perhaps motivate them to keep moving forward?
Implementing that rule that I mentioned earlier of screening everyone, trying to make it an objective screening, not subjective, and really using your resources to show the patient. Take some time to build your resources to get your team on the same page. Walk through that practice 3 times. One is the patient, one is the staff, and one is the doctor, and think about that flow and how can you make it smoother, because those things are what determine your longevity if change, right? Are you going to stick with it or are you not? So those are critical. And then I would say having, like I said, the resources, so the scripting, but having your go-to answers on the 2 big categories, which is inflammation and oil. So what test am I going to do to prove it? And what am I going to show the patient? And then what treatment am I going to put with it? And then under that, your lid function, your bacteria, your allergy, all the other categories. But I hardly ever have a patient where their headliner is not oil and inflammation. So make that a home run. Now, If somebody wants to go all in, and I don't mean taking out the rest of their practice, I just mean really diving in, and they want to save the years of processes to actually get to that level of implementation. Use these amazing courses that are out there. I mean, ours is different than others in that it truly is focused on implementation. That's what it was built on. I spent 6 months developing the resources because I said, this is crazy. We've got all these practices trying to start from zero, and it's not necessary. We need some core fundamental resources, and we use it for a 600 square foot practice or a 6 location or 6,000 square foot, whatever. And that's what we've built. And so instead of trying to create all these forms on your own, we've got it turnkey. And what we do, it's small. We have 10 people typically, and it's 2 days, it's 20 hours of CE. So we are very intense during that time. But the whole first day is if this, then that, so that you know exactly what you're looking at. You know what it interprets to diagnostically. You know what treatment you're going to pair it with, and you know how to deliver it. So if this, then that. We spend about 2 hours of experience station, includes the slit lamp and all the different tools and tricks and things that are out there. The next day, we're in the clinic to experience a live dry eye eval, all the big devices, the protocols around those, and then office layout. And we go back to the condo, and we talk about the logistics. So the scheduling and the flow, this matters. Another tip that I tell my docs all the time is you do that dry eye eval last before lunch and last before the end of the day. Because for several reasons, your ambassador is going to be available, your workup room, you're not going to tie that up, but also it gives you the time to develop those words and that story to tell that patient, and get good at it without feeling rushed. So some patients need more than others. But we focus on that. We do billing and coding. We do marketing. We have a marketing kit that's already customized and ready. We talk about holistic care and how to connect with those patients that come in with baggage. And that's about it. Billing, coding, staff training, patient education. It's all the nuts and bolts behind it. And then there's a 500-page manual that has everything there, everything you need. It's on the USB, just ready to plug and play. And so the biggest mistake I see, and this is the answer to that, is people going out and buying big devices, your IPL, whatever it is, and then not spending that extra $2,000 or however much it is to actually learn how to make it work in your practice. It's like buying a Lamborghini and not putting gas in it. And that's what it feels like, because they
Yeah,
end up at the table going, oh, my patients won't pay for that. No, that's not the case.
yeah, I think a lot of people can relate who have spent a lot of money on a piece of technology that's just collecting dust now in their practice. How could people find out more about you and the Dry Eye Institute if they were considering taking that next step?
We are at dryeye.institute. So there's no com, there's
Oh,
no org, nothing, just dryeye.institute. And we actually, our next retreat is February 19th and 20th. So it's coming just around the corner. The biggest thing I hear regret wise from doctors is I should have done it sooner, because those outcomes just get pushed, the revenue, all of that can, because this is about implementation, you see the reward immediately. And so every month that you wait, you end up leaving that on the table.
well, and I think one of the biggest benefits too of things like this are saving yourself a lot of lost time, money, and resources
Yeah.
on all the mistakes that you had made. I'm sure you've made a lot of mistakes. I have yet to meet a very successful person in any realm of anything that wouldn't tell you they made all these mistakes. And I think it's one of the benefits that makes the ROI on things like this worth it in terms of let me let me learn from someone else who's made all the mistakes, and the amount of money that you'll save there is probably difficult to even put a dollar figure on. But thank you so much. I appreciate your time. You were going to say something there, I think.
Well, I was just going to say on top of that, Steve, burnout is real. And what I hate to see doctors wait on to is this brings so much fulfillment. It changes everything. And so to be able to have that is a gift. And there's a lot of doctors out there who are no longer enamored with their day-to-day world. And you see it, I know as well.
50% to be specific of physicians in the US claim to be either moderately to severely burned out. And yeah, the same data actually shows that one of the key ways to prevent burnout is with physicians especially, is to reestablish the connections with your patients. It's why we got into this thing in the first place, but burnout comes from a lot of the external things, the administrative burden, the staffing challenges, and to be able to get back to just that patient care and feeling that connection with the patient, which is probably something that you tackled early on and said, I want to get back to that. And appreciate you sharing your journey in getting back to that.
Thank you, Steve. I enjoyed our time together.
Thank you, Crystal. And thank you, everyone, for listening. It's been a pleasure, and we will see you in the next episode.
All right. Bye bye.